I will now pull out the names and ask other members to confirm that they're present. So if I could start off, please, with Pete. Pete, are you here? I don't think so. I take it not, but maybe if Helen, are you with us?
Sorry, I'm having similar difficulties this morning, but never mind.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I see her.
Okay, yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Helen, hi. Good morning. It's nice to see you.
Morning.
Hello. I'm looking on the membership list too, the participants too. Steve Harmon. Hello, good morning. I'm not sure if Steve is here. I don't think so. I can't see him on participants. Nope. Mark, good morning. I think I can see you there. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Mark King.
Mark, thank you. David, good morning. I can see you too. David Yorth, it's nice to see you.
Just wave.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks. Good morning. And Tony Whitlock. Is Tony with us too?
Yes, yes.
Good
morning.
Tony there. Thank you very much. Good morning. We all know the form, but if I could please just remind people, I'll try certainly to keep the background noise to a minimum, and please, if we can all, as we always do, speak just one person at a time. And as you've already done, please mute mics when not in use. If you'd like to speak, then please let us know, ideally by typing MIS, may I speak, in the chat. And if I don't spot it, then please point it out. I think if anyone does have to leave, if they could please let me know, it would be appreciated. And if you subsequently return, if you could also let me know too, that would be great. We may well have people losing connection, as we've discussed, or miss any part of the meeting. And if so, then if there are any votes, we may ask them not to participate in those, but we'll need to sort that out if that occurs. Should the board need to take a vote in order to expedite a result, I'll assume a majority position. So if you wish to abstain or vote against, then please indicate it. So any questions for now, or should we just crack ahead?
Yeah, so, Chair, it's Paul Crossley. I've done a MIS. I have a lot of bandwidth problems. I have a lot of bandwidth problems. So are you okay if I turn my video off as well as my audio, except when I speak, and then I'll put the video back on?
By all means, certainly. Yeah, no, thank you for letting me know. And wouldn't it be nice? I was in Bath yesterday. It was completely lovely. Wouldn't it just be nice to be in person? But maybe we'll get to that soon, I hope. So we'll have travel challenges as opposed to technology challenges, but I'll look forward to that. I don't know if we've received any apologies for absence. I don't believe so.
No, none, Chair.
Thank you. So maybe if we can move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? I take that as none. That's great. Cracking. There's no urgent business, and there are no public or councillor statements. So if we could please move to the minutes of the last meeting on the 27th of May. They've been circulated, but I'm just wondering if anyone has any comments, or if I can confirm these as correct. Any comments, please? If not, we can confirm them to be correct. That's great, so thank you. So the good news is we're on to the regulatory update, item 8. And Jeff, I understand you're going to present this report to us. Is that correct?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for that. Yeah, so this is on page 13. So the legislative and regulatory update paper for noting. So the any key, a summary of any key matters are actually contained within the report. There hasn't been very much by way of movement in the last quarter, but there has been a bit of progress on the public sector exit payment cap, and progress on McLeod, and that the public sector pensions bill going through its first reading in Parliament, and a little on the cost control mechanism. Other than that, the appendix contains all the other matters that are pending, that have been pending for some time now, but obviously we update that as things emerge. I'm happy to take any questions on that particular paper.
I think relatively, Jeff, it's kind of steady as it goes, as much as ever is steady in the LGPS. Is that right? But as you say, it hasn't been too turbulent a period recently.
It's been a very quiet quarter. Obviously, I think we are expecting the re-emergence of the exit payments cap to come through towards the end of this year. We're just waiting for Parliament to progress that, government to progress that. But yes, we're getting geared up for an announcement to come through on that. Hopefully, it won't be as bad as the announcement that came through at the end of last year, and then got receded.
So any questions for anybody for Jeff, please?
Yes, please, Nick.
Certainly. Yeah.
Just on the McLeod judgment, whereabouts are we? Obviously, it's a big issue for all employers in terms of what the impact might be. Is there a sort of a timeline for resolution, etc., around this?
Yes, so I can kind of give you a bit of an update on where we are as a fund administrating this at the moment. So we're in the data collection phase at the moment. So we're well ahead on that. We've got a team in place being led by an officer with a small team to ensure that we're collecting the data from our employers. Claire may be able to give a more specific update in a second, but the implementation of McLeod is expected in 2023. So that's when the remedy will come into play. Obviously, that we're waiting for the legislation to go through Parliament and the regulations to be issued on that. But we are kind of doing all we can at the moment to be kind of ahead of the game, in as much as our data will be in a good place once remedy comes through.
Right, thank you.
Claire, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, just steady progress working through with employers. We've, as of last month, we'd completed 130 employers with their data updates. So slow and steady, really. We've got the two main unitaries that we have to work on, and that's still work in progress. But yeah, everything's on track at the moment with that one.
Well, thank you. Any further questions for Jeff, please? Or Claire, indeed. Nothing further. That's great. So thank you. So if we can note that and move on, that's great. So I think, Jeff, you're going to take us through the fund and employer performance as well, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is on page 47 of your pack. This is the Pension Fund Administration overview and summary performance report. And this particular report really focuses on performance and workload specifically. So I think you cast your minds back to previous reports. They're normally about a dozen appendices. This has been sort of split down a little bit, sort of reduced a little bit to focus around our own performance at the moment. So I'll kind of summarize the report itself and kind of give you a bit of a storyline. So over the past 18 months, so since we've been in the sort of the COVID period, if you like, we've had a significant increase in workload and in monthly tasks coming through. At the same time, we've actually been through a major recruitment phase. This was agreed by the committee back in 2020 to recruit a shortfall of about 11 to 12 staff. But over the sort of intervening 18-month period, we've actually had 22 staff either newly appointed or have moved internally. That's obviously been a significant sort of piece of upheaval within the administration in managing sort of day-to-day workload and process, whilst people are trained up and getting used to their new roles, etc., and doing all of this very much remotely. At the same time, at the moment, we still have just over four posts that remain vacant of that phased recruitment process, and on top of that, we have a number of other posts that we still haven't recruited into, including the technical and compliance advisor role following following Kate's departure back in June, and the fact that we didn't recruit anyone successfully when we put the advert out in the summer. There were no applicants. at all. But we'll be revisiting that in the coming months. During the time, the last sort of 15 months or so, and particularly most recently, work on key projects has continued. Certainly where we are sort of managing our service delivery, and particularly around statutory requirements of issuing annual benefit statements, and as on the employer services side, preparation for getting everyone on board for iConnect. So all those pieces of work have been going on in the background, as well as the day-to-day engagement with members. As I mentioned on the earlier paper, we've got a project underway to manage McLeod, and a significant piece of work similar to McLeod, but on the firefighter pension scheme, which is known as immediate detriment. So fire schemes are going through McLeod also, but they have something slightly different, which allows immediate payment of member pensions rather than members having to wait for McLeod to be remedied. And that's a significant piece of work for officers to manage internally at the moment. So we've got 50 to 80 members that we have to manage over the course of the next couple of years through this immediate detriment process, with no supporting software. So everything has to be done manually, and we obviously have to reflect the old scheme regulations manually, and everything that just slows everything down, makes the whole sort of workforce workflow much more complex. So that was a little bit around sort of where we are work-wise. I wanted to take you through the appendices, which really shows our performance in a little bit more detail, particularly Appendix or Annex 1 on page 51 to start with. So the aim generally for the fund is to operate in a sort of above 90% sort of performance, and at the moment we are mostly targeting, or we're mostly showing sort of red and amber, so our performance is less than 75% in many cases. The volume of cases going through just aren't at the moment hitting the target times. So that's generally across the board. The TPR remit was that funds should focus on critical cases, particularly around retirements and deaths. So we have focused on that within the team itself, but there's, because of the factors I mentioned earlier, that there has been some slippage. If you can just go to page 52, that does give a little bit more of a breakdown of where we are within target, and perhaps we can look at retirements from active as an example, where we've got the quotation. I mean, just take the very top line. The SLA states that we should be operating within 15 days. It's taken us around 12 days overall. Most of our cases, or majority of cases, are actually within the 15 days in this particular example, but there are a significant high volume of numbers that are outside of that. So from 16 days onwards, we've got 33 cases which are over 5 days late, 5 days outside the SLA, 35 cases that are sort of four weeks late, and then so on and so forth. 11 cases, six cases are over 31 days late. So, we're clearly having some issues around performance there, and I think part of it is capability and capacity within the team at the moment, and we're clearly needing to kind of address some of these cases going forward. There are some significant other areas where we are quite red also around transfers in, transfers out. So it's an issue that we're kind of aware of, and we're going to be looking at addressing going forward. I want to come on to that. Generally, on page 53, you can see the general trend over the last year, where performance has kind of tailed off or not improved in any way. So, I think, we're aware of the situation. We need to put some steps in place to kind of manage this going forward. So I've actually met with managers, particularly on member services, to start with, to look at how we're going to tackle this. And I think workload wise, in the report itself, I think you can see I will just backtrack slightly because I probably should have reflected on the fact we have had an increase in workload. I think we're showing at the moment 50+% higher workload outstanding at this point in time than where we were in March 2020. So we're clearly not clearing the work that's coming in, and it's gradually building a bit of a backlog. We're seeing 400 cases per month come in over and above what we were receiving previously. And there's been a 35% increase in member estimate requests. So, you know, we kind of need to think a bit more smartly about how we're going to be dealing with that. So we're going to put a key piece of work involved around clearing back that whole sort of backlog of workload starting in October. So we're going to split the member services team into two, and the larger part of the team will deal with backlog, and we'll have a time period in which to deal with those cases, and this will be reported through to the pension board and pension committee. So the idea is it will set ourselves 6 months by which to clear down everything, with a review after 3 months to see if we're on track. We'll break down these cases by type, and obviously focus on the critical cases first, but then deal with all the other cases subsequently. At the same time, we'll introduce, having split the team, we'll have a team that will deal with business as usual. So anything new coming through will be picked up by the other part of the team, and that should really enable us to keep on top of the work as it comes in, as it's new cases. So we should be able to meet our SLA deadlines there, and certainly be able to reflect better against KPIs. As we reduce the backlog down over a period of time, then the team dealing with business as usual will grow, because members will move across from one area to the other. So we've had an initial meeting to kick this off. Got sign up from the members of staff involved in running this, and it's just a case now of actually getting down, sorting out the detail, moving that forward. But the idea is that we clearly can't continue this downward trend, and we need to improve our KPIs and our performance for our members going forward. So that's that area around workload on the member services side. I mentioned about the sort of the increase in estimate requests. So we're looking now to try and encourage members to sort of self-service, because most of these requests are very straightforward, estimates. I'm 35 years of age. I want an estimate when I'm 60. So people can self-service and work those information out for themselves by signing up to My Pension online. The data, because we receive by and large data on a monthly basis through iConnect, that information is readily available, so it should be up to date in general. So members should be able to self-service and get a fairly reasonable estimate by using MSS. So we're putting together a small customer service team which will manage this information going forward. So they're in the process of being trained up now, and they will triage the incoming post as it comes in, and where it is where it's an issue where a member could actually be pointed down the self-service route, then they will be very much heavily involved in trying to direct and signpost members to kind of self-serve. So hopefully that will begin to take some of the pressure off of the member services team and reduce some of the workload that sits there at the moment and actually could be done much more efficiently. Likewise, also, I think Claire hasn't mentioned this, but we've got a situation whereby with iConnect now we get lots of leavers coming through the IC process, iConnect process. That's causing, I think, at the moment a bit of an issue around volumes. So we are looking to see if we can kind of automate that process a little more, working with our software provider. So that hopefully will streamline some of those cases that are coming through. They have to be at the moment manually triaged to identify whether it's an aggregation, whether it's a deferred or refund case. So this hopefully will, or a post change. So this hopefully will, in time, reduce down the number of cases that are coming through on employer services, having to be triaged, and then being passed on to member services to be processed. So hopefully it will reduce some of that onboarding, the sort of burdening workload there. So there's a fair bit of work that we need to do on the sort of processing side of things, and I think we give ourselves 6 months to try and really get on top of this and improve our service performance and service delivery going forward. I'm happy to take any questions. I haven't covered all of the other appendices, but data improvement plan, there's a little bit of a reduction in performance or our data score, if you like. But you have to bear in mind that we review our data on an ongoing basis. Because of year end, that normally means there's a lot more data to process and to reconcile. That sort of normally does cause a kind of a spike in our data score, and sort of that hopefully will be addressed going forward. It's a minor downturn in data score overall, and I think Appendix 3 really just outlines work done on a number of key projects, particularly around annual benefit statements, and to reflect the performance for member self-service on receiving ABSs, or members even signing up to member self-serve. So that's kind of where we're sitting at the moment, numbers-wise, across membership. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Jeff,
Nick,
or shall I kick off? Helen, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'd put in an MIS. Yeah, Jeff, can I thank you for your report? And in essence, you've answered most of the questions I had when I read through the report, because I think it is about the balance between current and backlog and how you manage that. And I'm pleased to see that you've set in place an improvement plan to try and tackle it within a reasonable timescale. I had just a couple of questions. One was, why do you think there's been quite a substantial increase in queries? And secondly, I mean, I think the route for a lot of the sort of standard questions is through the My Pension. And I just wondered, I know it's being picked up in the next report as well, but is there anything that through the board that we could do to raise awareness? Because basically, if you look at who, to an extent, when I looked at, I know I'm sort of jumping ahead to the next report, but when you look at the people who are using My Pension, you would have an expectation that possibly younger people or people in their middle age would be doing it more, but there doesn't seem, it's not being taken up across age groups, and somehow we've got to get people to really see that that's the way to do the business, to take some of the basic load off of you. But that's one question. The other was around why you think there's been such an increase in queries.
Well, yes, thank you, Helen. I can take your first point first, if I can. I think part of the reason is there's been a lot of uncertainty around COVID. People are asking for more information from us. There has been an increase in movement within employers as well, so that generates an increase in workload. Also, I think our general inquiries have gone up. I think Anna would agree that we've had an increase in members just writing in, asking just for information generally. Not even just an estimate, but just generally asking for information on the fund. So it's just been a gradual. I think it's been a bit of a slow burn, but looking back, we can see that there actually has been a significant increase in traffic on a monthly basis of about 400 cases per month on average across the last 18 months, which is quite significant. But I think probably we wouldn't notice it so much if we'd retained all of our staff and we haven't had so much internal movement. So the other impact has been having the capability or the capacity to deal with the work that's been in front of us. There's been a lot of new people in post, a lot of trainings taking place. Although we have a training resource on board now, there still is a certain amount of training having to be done by peers within the group. So it just all adds to slowing things down. But yeah, so hopefully that partially, I don't know, Anna, whether there's anything you want to add to that on traffic.
No, there isn't anything I can add. Yeah, there has been a definite increase in general inquiries, and I think in part because we're behind. You know, people are inquiring again, where is this? So we are getting those chaser inquiries, and it's very difficult to filter in the current system we've got set up. So we are moving away from that and addressing those problems and giving people ownership over cases as well. So they will have alpha splits going forward. So they'll see a case through. So there is that positivity there. And whereas at the moment it just goes into a general pool, let's say, and anyone could pick it up. So yeah.
Okay, so the other point around take up of My Pension Online, I think we need to think about, you know, trying to promote usage of it more, particularly around those critical points in someone's employment, getting them to sign up when they join, at a point when they leave, rather than, I mean, at the moment we tend to get a spike in take up when we issue annual benefit statements, because there's a lot of information around there about sign up to My Pension Online. I suppose in a way you want to actually dangle a carrot, as this is something that would be really useful for you to be able to go in and just review your pension details at any point in time, but to get people on board at the beginning of their employment rather than once they've already joined, and you know there's some way down that journey. Most people don't think about pensions until such time as they're looking to draw their pension. It just happens in the background. It's ongoing. Then when they get near retirement age, there's a thought there, perhaps I'll inquire, find out what my pension is. But there's no, we need to try and encourage people to maybe sort of take it up as a default to using My Pension Online rather than the current standard method, which is receiving everything by post. And I think also the other way is to actually maybe the better use of technology. Really, we probably need something that reflects more of an app, so someone can have that on a mobile device, rather than at the moment it's really rather kind of tailored to you having to have a sign into a computer to have that information. So I think we need to work with our sort of IT development and our software provider to kind of improve that member experience and make it more user friendly.
Yeah, certainly. I think both David and Tony have their hands up. David, I think you were first. So maybe David, if you could start, and then we'll come to Tony, if you may, please.
Thanks very much. And ask one of my questions, but the other one is in paragraph 5.5. We talk about the amount of work that's been outsourced, and there was no comment made on whether that will increase, decrease, or remain the same. There's obviously clearly dangers with outsourcing some of this, and ideally, because the structure's device as it's retained in-house. I'm just wondering where we're going, in which direction we're going with that, really.
Yeah, well, there's no. Sorry, David.
Okay, the other one's something else, something different.
Right. So at the moment, there's no intention on outsourcing anything else. The two projects which have been outsourced were the GMP reconciliation project and the address tracing project, and that was, although they've been outsourced, it's part of the work has been outsourced. But once the work is dealt with by the outsourced provider, then the work actually comes back into the APF for officers to finish off. So those were two bulk areas which it felt would be easier to manage off-site, because they were bulk exercises. You probably know we've had the address tracing issue on the agenda going back a number of years now, where we had 4,000 odd cases to be traced. Now we've been through that process once, and we're going through that process again now. Unfortunately, you can't stop people changing their address and not telling you, although we do try to encourage everyone to tell us when they change their address. So having gone through the exercise once and got the numbers down, within a short space of time, they actually crept back up to exactly where they were in the first place. So we've gone through this process of outsourcing it again through a consultancy firm to track these members down, and then we're following it up with letters of confirmation to those members to confirm they are actually living where they state or where it's been transpired. But there's no intention at the moment to outsource anything else. But it remains the case that if we felt as though there was something that would benefit us as a fund, as an administration, to outsource, and it was bulk, then we could consider it. But we would bring that to board, I think, first for board and committee for a decision on whether we'd move that.
Thank you. So I think Tony was next, and then Peter's afterwards, if I may, please. So Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I do wonder with the increasing workload can be a little bit attributable to the fact that an awful lot of our members, especially current members, are now working in some kind of blended working environment and predominantly working at home, and have actually therefore got a little bit more time to think about some of these things like pensions. They're not traveling back and forth to work all the time. So, you get the feeling that perhaps some people, are starting to think about some of these issues, particularly as, the COVID situation has dragged on for a lot of people. It is, anecdotally, I think it is starting to encourage people to think about their work-life balance as well and start to think about different choices. So I think that some of this is, isn't sort of necessarily natural demand. I think it's a consequence of the situation that we've been in, and actually having an impact then on the way that people kind of evaluate their lives and what they want to do going forward. So I think we could probably need to do a little bit more work on the sort of demand to try and understand actually what is driving it. Are we seeing a bit of a paradigm shift in work-life balance, and then we're going to see more people, retiring perhaps a little bit earlier and taking those kind of decisions, or is this an increase in what would be sort of termed natural churn, I guess? And I don't know what the answer is, but I think we just need to sort of understand that a little bit more, really, in terms of designing solutions. Is this temporary because the situation we're in, or are we seeing, a new norm? Yeah, because one of the things I would have expected would have been less churn in sort of turnover of staff, particularly as people are not incurring lots and lots of costs in travelling to work and servicing their time in work. So disposable income's been rising. So one of the things that you see with that generally is that if there's no challenge to disposable income, the need for people to move diminishes. People tend to be a bit more happier to stay in the jobs that they're in because they got more disposable income anyway. So I think the issue is probably quite a complicated one. We need to understand a little bit more about what's driving this demand.
Certainly.
That's all I'm going to say, Chair.
No, thank you, Tony. And I think I was going to ask about the way the world has changed too in terms of recruitment, but I'll come to that if I may in a minute, because Pete, you were before me, so I do beg your pardon.
So I think a couple of observations around similar things. It was just the assumption around the blended working model and perhaps not so much of a return to the office, and how that might be impacting performance when you've got lots of new staff who require training. And would it be more efficient to be back in the office if possible? And I guess also with the performance as it is, that drain on your existing key members of staff and that retention element, particularly when they're working in isolation at home. I know Tony and yourself have talked about that support mechanism that we've had before, but undoubtedly it's a different way of working. And when you're sat there and just seeing the workload increase time after time, I just wondered whether you had any reflections on about whether it would be better to get back in the office, etc., more, and that would help in terms of team motivation, support, etc.
Yeah, well, thank you, Pete. I mean, it's a really sort of valid question, really, and I think I'm not on mute, am I? No. I think that for the team, certainly the member service and the employer-facing teams, they do rely on sort of working together as a team and actually working across between the two teams. So in an ideal environment, we would have that situation in place. I'll come back to the working arrangements in a second, but you're quite right about morale. There's nothing more demoralising to open up your task list and not be able to see the end of it. I think at the moment what we're finding also is the fact that people just cannot see the wood for the trees, really, because it's just a relentless list of tasks. You can come in and clear 20 tasks in a day, or 30 tasks in a day, depending on what the nature of the tasks are. But you've really not you've not made any kind of indentation into the overall workload. So what we're going to do now is as Anna mentioned earlier, is to kind of identify, go back to what we had previously in years gone by, is an alphabetical split, give people ownership. With a backlog, there will be a finite end. There'll be an end to that backlog, so people will be able to see those numbers reduce. So hopefully that will improve sort of morale around working through stuff. And likewise with the team dealing with business as usual, they'll pretty much be starting with a pretty much clean slate. So hopefully that will kind of go some way to improving the general workflow of work. But we do need to review how we're going to manage working sort of going forward, and how that really is going to support our officers to do the job that they're employed to do, and that's service the membership, really. So there clearly has to be a sensible approach to returning to some form of normality. Now we understand it's not going to be the old normal, it's going to be something slightly different. It's going to be blended, because that's the new buzzword now. So we're going to have to manage with that. But I think you're going to have to think about your resource and where your resource should be. And if you do need more resource around member services or employer services, potentially in the office more of the time, then that needs to be the case. Because some of the roles can work quite happily away from the office, but where you need that team working environment, because that's particularly for new people and people that you tend to gain experience and knowledge through those across the desk conversations. It's very, very difficult to manage that when you're working in isolation. And it's I feel particularly for those new staff, and as you quite rightly pointed out, Pete, those experienced staff who at the moment are finding their time completely sort of stretched, or their day is stretched, really, because they're called upon to try and cover off what would otherwise be undertaken by some of the other staff who are coming through but would be in the office. So it's quite a juggling act, I think, at the moment, but we do need to return to something normal. I don't know, Tony, if there's anything you want to add on top of that about office working.
Chair, I think that there's been an awful lot of pressure placed on the pension management team to get us through what has been a very difficult period, and a lot of the burden, I think, on trying to manage this transition and get all these staff in has fallen, on Jeff and Anna and Claire and the other managers in the service. And I guess there's a little bit of, there doesn't seem to be a little bit of an end in sight at the moment as to even when we're going to start this new kind of blended working as well. We're still waiting for works to begin on the new offices, and there are still ongoing discussions, and we are trying to push to get more resource, more space for pensions as part of that process. I think the difficult, I guess the bit that I see which is quite difficult about not being able to work in the teams is, it's not so much all the positive things, but it's the fact that you haven't got a shared burden either. So the burdens become very much individual. you know, and you lose that sense of, you know, we're all in this together, having to fight the same corner, to deal with the same backlog, the same challenges, and it becomes much more personal when you're in that kind of isolated environment rather than that team environment, you know. So I think it is more difficult for staff then, you know, to actually share some of that emotional burden, I guess, that otherwise you'd be able to do in a normal team environment. And it's, you know, to be honest, it's not just in pensions, it's in all of the sort of heavy transactional services, to be honest. We're seeing the same kind of issues, really, where, you know, an awful lot more effort has to be put in by the management team to keep the ship afloat, to keep things churning, and actually to keep trying to energize the service, really. And I think we've got, you know, we've got an awful lot of good staff work across the council, but actually they are a little bit fatigued now, you know, and I think everybody is with the situation. And even these meetings, you know, become quite challenging after doing so many on Zoom for so many years. And I think we all find that, really. And I think, you know, we could just do with a little bit of a breather every now and then, you know, but there is no sign of that. So I mean, you know, the challenge for Jeff and Anna and myself is to think of different ways to keep re-energizing and keep trying to you know, take those little baby steps forward all the time, and potentially not to be too ambitious over the next few months. You know, we need to sort of to have a bit of a steady ship, really, keep on top of things as much as we can, and until, you know, once we get into that new way of working and actually settle that down a little bit, then we can do a bit more of a re-evaluation as to actually how we're going to take some of the other challenges forward, really.
Thank you. I mean, I think. Oh, sorry, Pete. Did you have you put your hand up?
It was just a response to that. I think,
yeah, sorry.
as a board, I think we absolutely want to support the teams, and I echo what Tony said about having some highly dedicated staff that are there, and we need to be doing as much as possible to support the teams, etc., so that they can find that space to do that work. And if that means going to the employing authority or whatever and saying, this is now becoming such a priority because of where we are, and I think we should be making a representation as a group.
I think you're completely right, Pete. I think, I mean, although I'm slightly in denial that the world has significantly changed, we are moving to this blended working. Although I would like to go back to being in all the time, and even us meeting up physically today, it would be nice. But actually, this is the new norm, and it will be the way we have to work. So I guess my question to Tony and Jeff would be, if we're recognizing this is the blended way of working, how do you feel we're making, are you happy with the progress we're making in terms of having that new infrastructure in place? And I'll maybe give you one example. I did a thing with Mercer's recently, and Amy was on there. She heads up operations at West Mids, and she was actually saying they've had in place for a while. When their new people start, they have a new cohort of, let's say, 4 or 5 people. And actually, they're getting them all into a building under all the rules they were doing it, but actually to get them trained up, established, you know, equipped, trained, getting to meet people, having a support network, and then up and running before moving back to blended working. I suppose my question is really how you feel we're making progress in terms of having that blended infrastructure for enabling us to work the right way as a pension fund within our current environment.
At the moment, Chair, I'm not sure we're there in terms of having that blended infrastructure. I mean, there is some space being released in the offices which is bookable space, but comes with an administrative burden at the moment. And I think that what we're trying to do is to push for more space on a permanent basis as part of the overall solution. That's what we want, so that we've got a bigger office for the administration to use, and other aspects of the council. And we, you know, as a fund, we will be paying for that. You know, so that will, you know, so that hopefully will materialise. The whole process, though, is a little slow. You know, it's gonna take time, and there are lots and lots of factors for that and reasons for that. You know, and quite a few of those are outside of the council's control as well. Really, you know, so it is a case of having to be patient. I would be interested to know within the COVID rules how people are doing this, because we are also operating within the COVID rules, and I think the COVID rules are up for interpretation by different organisations. You know, and we've got to live within the interpretation that our council has put on those rules.
And it is difficult, and as you say, it's interpretation. But I think it's having those facilities. But I guess it's also, I have seen some cases where doing hybrid is possibly even more difficult than doing both, having some people in the remote calls. But again, I suppose some technology is enabling that. But it's I guess it's just a question of also how well are we doing on the tech in terms of tooling people up. I struggled with Zoom just now, but this is the only meeting I do on Zoom these days. Everyone else is on Teams. I've almost become competent on Teams, but I don't know if it's a better tool, but how established are we getting in terms of people having dedicated kit, the right tools, always ready to go, or is that still a bit of a challenge too at the moment?
Do you want me to? I'll try and answer that as much as I can. So the situation at the moment is that our employing authority are rolling out the technology, but it's not available across the board at the moment. So within pensions, I think we've got maybe one or two people who, probably one person on payroll that has the updated technology to work from. Everyone else at the moment is working off of either a council iGel or their own software. So, you know, I think we are not at the forefront of the rollout of laptops. We're certainly not in the first phase, and I don't know whether we're in the second phase. I don't think at the moment the council actually has laptops available for all. It's a process that's been gone through at the moment. We're 18 months into this now, so you know, yeah, it's disappointing, I think, from my point of view, particularly for certain areas of the administration whereby they find it difficult to actually be able to communicate either internally or on the employer services side. They have difficulty in communicating and carrying out or fulfilling their roles with other employers. I know Claire's been particularly frustrated about that, but we are kind of where we are. We've put requests in to have a small number of laptops provided, but you know, it's not, unfortunately the council is kind of not sort of necessarily, you know, allowing us to go down that route. But we have managed to secure one for an area which is particularly critical around payroll processes. So we have that one at the moment.
I think generally, Chair, you know, there has been a massive supply shortage for technology kit across the board. You know, internationally, there's been a computer chip shortage as well. You know, and you know, the council has experienced supply problems as part of that. So we are rolling out now phase 2 of the laptops. The majority of finance, including pensions, will be in phase 3. So that's what we understand at the moment, but I have no idea when phase 3 will start at the moment, because I don't know when this. I think the laptops are all secured. Whether they're in storage or not, I'm not clear about. But again, you know, a lot of the laptops have to be rolled out on an individual basis, so they have to be sort of tailored to individuals. So it all takes, unfortunately, it takes time. And IT, you know, the IT department itself is now having resource shortages as well. You know, so there is a bit of a challenge all round, really. You know, and the same way you read in the report about you know, problems we've had filling 1 or 2 vacancies. Well, generally there are labour shortages now which are cropping up in various guises across the council, which are creating problems.
Sorry, Jeff, I think you had your hand up, but we may have covered that point. So I'm not sure. Sorry.
So yeah, I was just going to add to Tony's point, because I'm directly involved in that rollout process. So the first thing is the technology is available in terms of Microsoft Teams, etc. That's available to everyone. The issue is whether the piece of localized equipment works very effectively using Teams. So clearly what the council's doing is decided to move its operating model in terms of how flexible working is applied to adopt laptop usage pretty much across the board. The council has now secured laptops for every single employee. So this is over 2,000 people. Around 500 laptops have been rolled out so far, and the next phase is underway right now. As Tony says, it's been extremely challenging to secure laptops. There's been massive national and international shortages of components, etc. So we've been subject to quite severe delays and cost pressures in that space. But we have now secured laptops for everyone. The technology is now available for everyone, and that rollout is starting to pick up pace. And we're actually reviewing the options for how we can increase that pace of rollout as well. So we originally were rolling out laptops to individuals. Now we're looking at rollouts to whole teams. So I would anticipate that within the next quarter, significant progress will be reached in terms of reaching those affected teams and individuals where the need is greatest. There is a prioritization process. I don't actually know where the pension fund is in the order. As Tony says, the vast majority of the finance service are at the back end of the process. That's simply due to a prioritization process. However, I will look at that separately to ensure that if there are significant issues within the pension fund, that we can accelerate that rollout to ensure that we continue to have an effective service there. So all those points are taken on board.
Thank you. So I suppose it's another key part of that kind of blended infrastructure, isn't it? It's just a component. It's not the be all and end all. But I guess also if new people are joining, it would be nice to set them up. Welcome to the Avon Pension Fund, and they're off and up and running. So that would be great. Thank you.
Nick, can I just?
Helen, of course.
Yeah. Sorry. I think I'm not quite sure how you go about this, but I do think from a pension board angle, I would quite like if it was possible for us to get a message into the higher management system that our level of concern, because there's been now a discussion for over half an hour around these issues, and I think the board generally has got concerns about the employees, their ability to do the job, the number of employees, the turnover, etc., balanced with new ways of working, the management task, balanced with the use of technology and all the rest of it. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but over the time that I've been on the board, I have had the impression that perhaps Baines in the past was behind the curve in terms of taking up IT and using IT in terms of service delivery. I could be completely wrong with that, but if it had been more embedded in the organisation, it wouldn't be quite such a big challenge as it currently seems to be. So I just think that if there was a way that our voice could be heard to support the team and what they're doing, because otherwise I absolutely take on board what Jeff has said and the steps that are going to be put in place to try and improve service delivery. But there is a bit of a catch-22 unless you get all the things lined up and things moving on. And I just think it would we are moving into a different phase, hopefully coming out of COVID. If there's anything that we could do as a board to reinforce the messages that have been stated here today and reinforce the work that the team is currently doing, because it's critical in terms of service delivery and improvement of service delivery. So
thank you. David, your hand may be up. Oh, sorry, Tony, beg your pardon.
Sorry, can I suggest that I take that offline and discuss it with Pension Board Chair and Vice Chair directly?
Thank you. Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Yeah. David, your hand is up, but it may be from earlier. I may have just not.
It was the second part of my first one.
Okay,
if I may. Paragraph 11, I was pleased to see paragraph 11 in the report, which talks about the impact of climate change. And there's one sentence in there which says that actually strategic asset allocation in terms of low carbon equities. So I was pleased to see that was in there, and I'm sure we'll come back to that in a larger debate later. But first time I can remember it actually appearing in capital letters on agenda paper.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for the discussion just now. I think, as you say, that there are lots of pressures, and I think also, Jeff, I mean, I think you mentioned the pressures on recruitment too, and that's another added pressure in terms of you being able to deliver the service. I don't know if there's anything further you'd like to add to that, or if there's any, or if it's a consequence of this remote working too, as Tony mentioned earlier. You know, people working at home means they can go for jobs elsewhere, or the LGPS seems to become a more competitive market. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that, Jeff. And I suppose my other question would also be the trials and tribulations that are the fire pension scheme, how demanding that is being on you. And I'm sure they're paying their way, but also if we've got a finite amount of resource, whether that's putting you in a conflicted position in terms of allocating work.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. So first of all, yes, the recruitment, I mean, it has been, I mean, I take my hat off to both Claire and Anna for the work they've done in processing or progressing the recruitment over the last year. I think it's been quite challenging to have gone through the recruitment process and then gone through the actual, the actual interviewing and selection, etc. It's been quite. It's been more challenging than I thought we thought it would be. But having doing it so remotely, it's not surprising. The retention of staff, I think, is becoming an issue now for us, and we've already seen examples of where we've lost members to other neighbouring or slightly further afield authorities because home working is now a major factor. That not necessarily people are being expected to travel and go into an office. This week I've lost another member of staff, long-serving member of staff who's now leaving us at the end of October. So and that's we are sort of fighting against other competition, I'm afraid, and we are kind of hamstrung, I guess, by the reward package that sits within our own authority. So but we are where we are. But certainly, I know Tony and myself have had a conversation around this, and it's an area we're probably looking at going forward, hopefully with HR. So on the other point that you've raised, Chair, around fire authority, I mean, I can quite happily say that I dealt with the fire authority fire pension scheme back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it really was a job that you could do on an afternoon, on a Friday afternoon once a month, and you would clear everything down because fire authority, there was very little movement. I mean, the fire scheme, fire membership is around about 1,000, of which about 600 are active members, but there was very little movement. That was then. We now have 4 separate fire schemes. We have probably a set of regulations that are so conflicting and so difficult to understand. For me, let alone anyone who's just coming into the service. We've now got this extra layer of complexity around fire immediate detriment, which means we've got no software to support this because it's not regulatory recognised, but it's something that all fire authorities are allowed to take up. And obviously with the pressure from the FBU for their membership, quite rightly, fire authorities are kind of are complying, if you like, with that membership, with the FBU, and allowing these members to basically take their pension earlier now than they would have under the new fire pension scheme regulations. But that is all done in accordance with something that is not regulated at the moment. So we may find, although we're dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, working very closely with the Fire Authority through this, but we may find that once McLeod Remedy actually comes out and is regulated, that what's been done will have to be revisited anyway. So we can end up doing this twice, possibly. But it is extremely complex, and I think for the resource, for our own staff, it is challenging, particularly again as we are having to do all this remotely. And I think this is where you would really want people to be able to work together. We have got a very small team that work on fire because of the expertise and the knowledge required. It isn't spread across the whole of the member services team in particular. So it is a small cohort of people who actually have the knowledge, and that also includes the quality assurance team. But for immediate detriment and business as usual, we are looking to probably expand some of that resource to enable us to cope. But that does have an impact on the day-to-day LGPS administration.
Thank you. So I'm guessing fire is what, 1 or 2% of your membership, but probably a significantly higher percentage in terms of hassle and workload, I guess.
Yes, there's a complete imbalance there now. Yes.
Yeah. And I think the concern is just the finite resource, rather selfishly, if you see what I mean, because of course you're put in this conflicted position. But thank you for explaining that. That's great.
So, Chair, we do have a service level agreement with the fire service, which Jeff has spent a lot of work revising now, given the position that we're in with them, and so we are in discussions with the fire service about the amount that they pay us for all the work we do.
Sure, certainly, yeah. Thank you. If there are no more questions on that, that was very helpful. Thank you, everybody. So I think, Tony, if we can note that then, and Tony, I think it's on to Brunel, our investment pool, please. I think that may be with you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, not a great deal to report in terms of developments for this quarter. As I may have indicated last time, the Brunel Oversight Board, because the county council elections have been quite a substantial change on the Oversight Board. So I think we've got 7 new chairs of pension funds across the partner funds within Brunel. Actually, though, quite a few of those are experienced pensions committee members as well, so they're not, so they're not entirely new to pensions. So I think the first couple of oversight boards have been fairly practicable in terms of content and management going forward, and it is difficult, I think, because those are still online, the oversight boards, and so the pension board chairs haven't had that opportunity to meet each other in person and and sort of build those relationships yet. But hopefully we can get to, over the coming months, we can get back to some kind of normality and start to have a few face-to-face meetings. In terms of workload, the transition is continuing now, and I think that most funds, around about the 70% sort of funding level transitioned. Avon has completed its transition insofar as it can. We still have some legacy assets to run off, and we still have the BlackRock QIF, which looks after our risk management strategy, which we kind of look after internally for the time being. So we've done everything that we can, and there is a oversight board meeting on Thursday, and that's going to receive a report on the transition of multi-asset credit and fixed income, and that report will look at sort of effectively how effectively the transition worked really, and what the savings gains, what the issues were with it, how difficult or easy it was. Brunel themselves have organised a couple of investor days for the end of September and beginning of October, and so I think there's a general invite for all sort of pensions members of all committees really. So I'm not sure whether that extends to pension boards as well, but I wouldn't imagine there'd be any problem if people wanted to have a look at that. And that was on the 27th September and the 6th of October. And the other thing is there is some engagement work being done by the shareholder NED directly with shareholders, and there is a shareholder forum, I think, due to take place in October. And that was agreed as part of the sort of improved governance arrangements a little while ago. So some of the issues we've had around with on communications between the shareholders and the Brunel board are now starting to be addressed though through the work that the shareholder NED is doing. So all in all, generally quite positive, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, very neat. Thank you. Any questions for Tony? Nope. All sounds great. Thank you very much. Annual audit review. Tarek, good morning. I understand you might be able to take us through the audit reports, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Tarek Rahman and I'm the audit manager with responsibility for undertaking the Avon Pension Fund audit reviews. So we last presented to the Avon Pension Board on the 13th of June 2019, and then due to the pandemic, we were unable to present for the financial year 2020-2021. However, since that time, we've carried out 5 audits, and these are the iConnect project, the scheme of delegation, the Altair IT system access audit, and the risk management and code of practice 14. The final version of all these audit reports are attached as appendices to this report, and all of these audit reports were given an audit opinion of substantial assurance, all good. What I'll do now is I'll just quickly summarize each of these reports because it's been some time. So starting with the iConnect audit, the iConnect platform is the mechanism by which member data is submitted by employing bodies. The purpose of the audit was to provide assurance over the management of the iConnect system implementation. So the audit looked at things like project governance, project planning, resource allocation, staff training, system security. We made 6 medium risk recommendations, and all of these were agreed by management. So moving on to the scheme of delegation, as we all know, as part of the Avon Pension Fund's operational activity, significant financial transactions occur, and it is necessary to have suitable authorization controls in place to safeguard financial assets. So at the time we did the audit, the Avon Pension Fund was in the process of updating the scheme of delegation, and through our involvement, we were able to confirm that it was providing a good framework of control. Obviously, because the audit opinion was good and we didn't find much wrong, only 1 medium risk audit recommendation was made, and this was agreed by management. So we reviewed the Altair IT system access audit to ensure that it was based on the concept of least privilege. So least privilege is an IT term, and what it basically means is that everyone who has access to the system has the minimum level of access required for them to carry out the day-to-day activity. The Altair system access is controlled by the financial systems team, and our audit looked at creating and removing accounts, password configuration policy, controls over administration level access, and third-party access. For this audit, 5 medium risk audit recommendations were made, and all of these were agreed by management. Right, so the focus for the risk management audit was ensuring compliance with the pension regulators' rules and guidance for risk management, and also for ensuring that the risks relating to the management of the pension fund and safeguarding its assets have been identified, assessed, documented, scrutinized, and if necessary, action has been taken to mitigate any risks. And then these are subject to regular review. So 2 medium risk recommendations were all made for this audit, and these were agreed by management. So the final audit, the Code of Practice 14, will be of particular interest to the board, and details of this work are recorded in sections 3.5 to 3.9 of this report. So to summarize, the pension scheme is regulated and overseen by the pensions regulator, who issues codes of practice to enable it to meet its statutory objectives. The Code of Practice 14 is directed at scheme managers and members of the pension board, and it is concerned with compliance to the various legal requirements relating to the governance, management, and administration of the pension schemes. So because it is of such importance to the scheme manager and the pension board, our approach is to review a specific area of the code of practice basis. And for the year 2021, the focus was on administration. So the audit set out to answer questions such as, are board members familiar with the pension scheme legislation? How are conflicts of interest identified and recorded? Is there an equal representation of employers and employees on the pension board? Is online pension board information readily available, and is it up to date? So for this piece of work, we noted many strengths, and some of these are listed in the internal audit report at section, I think it's 3.8. 2 medium risk recommendations were made and agreed. So in conclusion, since June 2019, we've carried out 5 pieces of internal audit work, and all of these pieces of work were given substantial assurance. So there is a good level of control for all the areas that we reviewed. We have followed up on the iConnect audit and the scheme of delegation audit, and all of the recommendations have been implemented. We have also followed up on the Altair system access audit, and for this audit there was a total of 5 medium risk recommendations. 4 of these have been implemented. 1 of them is in the process of being implemented. Then for the remaining 2 audits, the risk management audit and the Code of Practice 14, these are scheduled to be followed up in quarter 4. So I asked the pension board to note this report and also the work carried out on the Avon Pension Fund internal control environment. Thank you. That's everything from me. Back to the chair, but please feel free to ask any questions.
That's fab. Thank you very much indeed, Terry. Thank you. Steve, I'll let you go first. I had a comment to make, but Steve, you please fire away, and then David afterwards too.
Yeah, it's only a short comment, Chair. Can I thank Tariq and colleagues in the audit team for all the hard work they've put in, and thank Jeff and Tony and colleagues for making sure the controls are up to scratch. Bearing in mind the conversations we've just had about resourcing and being able to deliver. The flip side of that, the question I was going to ask was, can we be assured that everything is running smoothly, if not a bit slow? And the response that Tariq's given me in reading the report can justify that. So I just say thank you to Tariq, and thank you for Jeff and colleagues to making sure that we have some level of good assurance across the board. So thank you.
Perfectly put. Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve. David.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. There's quite a lot of stuff in this report, but generally it's a good read, I think, for as far as the management is concerned. But on page 2, it talks about project management, and it's going back to a former life, the use of Prince 2 as a project management tool. It may not be perfect, but at least it exists and it's recognised. Yeah. And I see the criticism in that section on project management, which I thought was rather mild, considering that there hadn't been any Prince 2 type management, but I assume it's too late now. But the lessons for the future, there are also a project management framework in place for Prince 2 or anything else, and we know what it is. Yeah. We gain from that by both managers and reviewers.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Jeff, would you like to comment? I think I think obviously learning these tools and having them in a person's toolbox when they work in pensions is valuable. But would you like to add any more in terms of your thoughts on that kind of those skills and training?
So the thing with project management is there are other models out there. Like, for example, there's agile project management models as well. And even though the pension board wasn't following Prince 2 to the letter, because with the Prince 2 model, it's known as a waterfall model. So you go from the start, you go to the end. And if there's anything that needs to be changed in the middle, you can't go back and change it. Where something like agile, what that allows you to do is you can jump back and forth. So if like, for example, like you're looking at a particular area of the system and you find that there's a weakness there, but then it's impacted by something else that you've done earlier, you can go back and rectify it like that. Having said that, our work did find that even though they weren't following Prince 2 methodology, they were following aspects of it, like the project planning, resource allocation, and things like that. Jeff, is there anything you want to add?
No, Brill, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, no, sorry, Chair. I would just add. I think it's a valid point that David makes. Certainly, I think really we probably do need to think about how we kind of deliver projects going forward. We do have a bit of a situation whereby depending on who's managing the project, we have a robust project plan in place which we follow, or we maybe use a different methodology, but we haven't got necessarily a consistent approach going forward. I think the particular project that maybe David was referring to, which was around the iConnect, the setting up of that was actually done very, very quickly. We didn't actually have anyone in place that where that project sat, that person or the people involved in that just didn't have that that previous sort of qualification, if you like, under Prince 2. But the project itself was kind of followed through pretty quickly and pretty exact, I think. I don't know, Claire, if you want to make any comment on that at all.
I may, yeah. I ran that project, so I personally, yes, I have had some project management training. The council have always used a person called Chris Croft in the past, which was a 2-day course which I'd done previously, and it was very much a last-minute thing that we had to do the project. And yes, in hindsight, it would be lovely to have maybe more project management training. We have discussed that as a management team. We were due to have some in March 2020, and as you can imagine, that got cancelled. So yes, and I think it is, you just build on your experience and things that you've done in the past. I think at the moment in pensions, we've got a lot of projects, but maybe we don't have anybody with a project management qualification. So maybe that is something we need to look at.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, can I also just add, part of our transformation programme is the recruitment of a project manager as well.
But it's also, I guess, spreading those skills out as well, isn't it, Jeff? Not just having them.
Absolutely.
And people having experience in that, so they know how to apply them.
Yeah.
That piece. Thank you. Just a couple of things, if I may, please. First, I'd like to reiterate completely what Steve said. We've given you a hard time over blended infrastructure, resourcing, KPIs, the whole shebang. And the fact you, with the support of audit and all working together, have achieved 5 substantial audit opinions is phenomenal. I think that is great. That is no mean achievement. So as Steve said, we're very appreciative of that. I think just maybe a couple of things. I don't know what the future plan is going forward, but Jeff, you've been very open with us about the challenges of the KPIs and what you're doing about them. And I think you're anticipating us seeing progress in, let's say, 6 months. So let's build a bit, and obviously that was for a prior period. So maybe we'd hopefully be sitting here in, let's say, 12 months' time, looking back on a prior period and seeing improvements. So I suppose I'm wondering how we're going to reassure ourselves of doing that, and where that sits in the audit plan, and if audit is, and how we make sure we're putting in place the right support to enable you to deliver, rather than give you a hard time when you're working your way through it. So I suppose it's 2 questions. I suppose it's what is the future audit plan in terms of other areas of pensions administration, and then also what can we reasonably ask to expect to see in 12 months' time, and maybe even possibly you've had a audit may have reviewed it in the meantime, but we might want the timing to be such that you can show progress and demonstrate it's all working. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Jeff, and Tarek likewise, and maybe Jeff too, Mr. Ring. So I don't know what people's thoughts are about that, please.
Yeah, so sorry, Chair. I'm just going to say, obviously, Tony, myself, normally discuss what we're looking at on the plan for the coming year, and then have that discussion with the audit team, and obviously then for obviously Tarek to undertake the actual audit itself. So, you know, I think for the coming year, we haven't actually had that discussion yet, but you know, I think those obviously are what we've discussed earlier in the meeting will be quite key to I think have on there some form of audit around progress on our performance.
Sure. But maybe not too soon in the period. We want time to give you the chance to demonstrate it. But,
well,
but Tony and others, what are your thoughts, please?
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, Tarek. I was wondering, I think I was going to ask Tony and maybe Jeff too, what their thoughts were in terms of the future audit plan and how we should, you know, the plan really for the next 12 to 18 months in terms of the audit reviews that are going to be undertaken.
I think, Chair, that you know, we do have a regular cycle of audits on particularly around our systems and around processes. The one report which is not mentioned in Tarek's report because it came through a little bit later is we've just had a pensions payroll audit, which again has given a good level of assurance, but I'm sure that will be picked up again in a future audit summation as well. So, you know, audit have been very proactive in the pensions area. And I think that, you know, one of the things that we need to do, given our set of circumstances, to make sure that those regularity audits continue. So I'd expect to see one or two of those other, or, you know, those similar audits coming through again over the next 18 months. Obviously, some of the key challenges that we face now will come through with the good governance report and the changes to COP14 as well. So I would expect those to feature in a future audit about whether we're actually compliant with the new requirements there. You know, and I think the third area, which is a bit of a chestnut of mine, really, given our ways of working and the sort of new reality, is anti-fraud. You know, and you know, given particularly some of the bigger frauds that are being constituted now, and our exposure, I guess, really, to that kind of behaviour. A lot more business being conducted online, a lot more opportunity for fraud as well. It's just getting that continued assurance about our anti-fraud measures. You know, that's an issue for me right across finance.
Thank you. That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Any more questions around the work by internal audit? Other than just, again, a big thank you to everybody, Tarek, his colleagues, and our folks too, for doing such a phenomenal job. All good. Great. Thank you. We can note that one. So I think next up, Carolyn, I think it may be over to you on the annual report, please.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Chair. So this report sets out the Pension Board's annual report for approval. The Pension Board reports annually to Council on the work it has undertaken in the previous 12 months, as well as its future work plan. The report will be taken to Council on the 18th of November this year, along with the Pension Committee's annual report to Council. Appendix 1 contains the draft report for review and approval by the Pension Board. And I'm happy to take any questions or any comments that board members may have.
Any questions or comments, please? Can't see any. I'm getting better at looking at this screen and thumbs and MISs, but any further comments? Nope. So thank you. So I think we're happy to approve. Any
Lovely.
any
Thank you.
disagreement? That's fab. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Pete, for letting me know you have to head off shortly. So we'll move swiftly on, if we may, please, Carolyn. I think it's over to you. Risk management update, please.
It is indeed. So, so this is the usual risk register and dashboard for noting. Following the quarterly review by the management team, there was just one risk score that was changed this month, and that was risk R01 around disaster recovery and business continuity. We've slightly increased the score on this one, and this is to reflect the fact that the business continuity plan is currently being reviewed by Audit. The fund also took part in a cybersecurity benchmarking exercise carried out by Aon, and based on our responses, Aon have benchmarked us against other LGPS funds who also took part in the exercise. So we're currently analysing the results and gaining further internal assurances from IT as well as from external providers. An action plan will be developed and a full report brought to Pension Committee for the November meeting, and this will also be taken to committee in December. So again, the report is for noting, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? I can't see any.
Nick, could I?
Oh, beg your pardon, Pete. Sorry, yeah, beg your pardon.
I just reflected that it stayed the same, but sustainability of working conditions under COVID, given the conversation we had today, whether or not in the next response that is likely to increase in terms of risk.
I believe, let me just have a look. I believe that it is already at quite a high risk anyway. But certainly what we do is we review the risk register on a quarterly basis. So we will be sort of regularly reviewing that, certainly. And obviously that will be part of our business continuity plan as well.
Yeah, I mean that's an amber risk on the risk register already, you know, so it's already flagged there. Recruitment of staff is a red risk. Whether it still needs to be red, given where we are, I think was something we'll have a discussion about when we next review the risk register. Clearly, we've got one or two issues in recruiting into specific roles at the moment.
Thank you. Righty ho. So we can note that one, please. Carolyn, moving on, if we may. Pension Board work plan and training plan, please.
Yeah, okay, so last report from myself. So attached to this report is the work plan and also the training plan for the year ahead. You will note that this time around I have slightly updated the format of the work plan, which hopefully everybody will find sort of easier and simpler to follow. Again, the report is for noting, and happy to take any questions or any comments.
Any questions or comments or thoughts in terms of, or maybe in terms of how you put a very neat schedule on there, Carolyn, in terms of the training plan, the availability of opportunities. I don't know how people feel about that, whether that's going to be valuable to them or whether they're getting the chance to book up, or how do they feel about those things?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've got the Brunel Investor Days. I have circulated the details about that. I think Tony covered those earlier. So generally speaking, as any training opportunities, seminars, etc. are advertised, I do circulate those around board members.
Certainly, yeah. I don't know if anyone's signed up for the LG fundamentals over this period. I'm not sure if we've got anyone keen on that or any feedback on it. Oh, David, sorry, your hand may be up, I think.
Yes, I was about to plead guilty to not having really addressed this issue for some while, and I think that I'm sure whether that nodding's for, Chair, that disapproval or understanding. I feel very conscious that I'm not quite as up to speed as I might be with recent developments. So any training information that's available, I'd be appreciated to see it and try and get back up to speed and tick the boxes on my chart.
No, certainly. Well, thank you. No, you're very honest, and I need to get up to speed on lots of things too. So I think we're all in a similar place. But as Carolyn does, Carolyn, if you can please continue as you do, forwarding stuff on to us, we'd appreciate it. And we need to sign up and be proactive, don't we, in terms of, because there's, even though we had a relatively quiet regulatory quarter, there's still a lot, and it is stunningly there's a lot going on. So it's good to gain as much knowledge for us as possible. So thank you. And then in terms of any things we need to do to fulfill our responsibilities in terms of the regulator toolkit and stuff, are we making good progress on that? Or I don't know specifically, or that maybe there are one or two outstanding would be good to get finalised if we could maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a requirement for pension board members, and I have circulated the link to the toolkit several times, and I have got quite a few confirmations from board members that they have completed it. But if I could just ask anybody who hasn't completed it or hasn't confirmed to me that they've completed it, if they could get that confirmation across to me, that would be great.
I promise to log in and check I've done everything. Scouts on it. I was never a scout, they wouldn't have me in, but I'll certainly check, so thank you. And I'm sure we all will do too, so thank you very much. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of everything. So I'd really just like to thank everyone for participating, and those who may have been watching. Thank them too for watching in, and I think we're there. So I look forward to us. Our next meeting is at the end of November. I look forward to us meeting up then. Thank you again. It's tough. I appreciate a tough job you're all doing, and I know we all do. And thank you for everyone's openness and honesty and contribution. And thanks again. Look forward to meeting up then. And I think we can now formally close the meeting.